Let us go back. As soon as Cortez heard news of the fleet that Narvaez was bringing, he at once dispatched a soldier to a province called the Land of the Chinantecs, near to where our soldiers had stayed when they went to search for mines, for the people of that province were very hostile to the Mexicans, and they had accepted our friendship a few days before. They used as arms very long lances, longer than ours from Castile, with 2 fathoms of flint and stone knives. So he sent to beg them to bring him promptly 300 of them, and to remove the knives, and as they possessed much copper, to make for each one 2 metal points. The soldier took with him the model which the point should resemble, and they fashioned the points far more perfectly than those we sent to order from them. He also commanded our soldier to demand of them 2,000 warriors, and by the day of the feast of Espiritu Santo to come with them to the town of Tampaniguita, and that the 2,000 men should bring lances. The cacique said that they would come with warriors, and the soldiers soon came with a matter of 200 Indians who carried the lances, and another of our soldiers remained behind to accompany the other warriors. The lances proved to be extremely good, and the soldier trained us and taught us how to handle them, and how we were to cope with horsemen. When we had made our muster and the list and record of all the soldiers and captains of our army, we found that there were 266, including the drummer and fifer, and not counting the friar. There were 5 horsemen and 2 small cannon, a few crossbowmen, and fewer musketeers. What we relied on for fighting with Narvaez was the lances, and they were very good, as will be seen further on. I have already stated that when we were in Santiago de Cuba, Cortez settled with André de Duero and with Amador de Lares that they should use their influence with Diego Velazquez to have him, Cortez, appointed captain general to go with that fleet, and that he would divide with them all the gold, silver, and jewels that might fall to his lot. As André de Duero saw that his partner, Cortez, was at this moment so rich and powerful, under pretext of making peace and acting in favor of Narvaez, he concealed his real intention, which was to claim his share in the partnership, for his other partner, Amador de Lares, was already dead. As Cortez was far-sighted and crafty, he not only promised to give André de Duero great wealth, but also to give him a command over the whole force, neither more nor less than he himself held, provided that he would induce Agustin Bermudez, who was chief constable in the camp of Narvaez, and other gentlemen whom I will not name here, to endeavor to lead Narvaez astray, so that he should not escape with his life or honor, and should be defeated. The better to lure and bind Duero to what he had been saying, Cortez loaded his 2 Cuban Indians with gold, and it seems that Duero gave a promise to him. Cortez also sent many ingots and jewels of gold to Bermudez, and to a priest named Juan de Leon and the priest Guevara. André de Duero stayed in our camp from the day of his arrival until after dinner the following day, which was the feast of Espiritu Santo. He dined with Cortez, and conversed a while with him in private. When dinner was over, Duero took leave of all of us, both captains and soldiers, and then, already on horseback, he once more approached Cortez and said, "What are your orders, your honor? I wish to depart." Cortez answered him, "God be with you. And look to it, Signor André de Duero, that what we have been talking about be well arranged. If not, by my conscience," for it was thus Cortez swore, "before 3 days are past I shall be there in your camp, and if I find anything contrary to what we have agreed upon, your honor will be the first to be pierced by my lance." Duero laughed and said, "I shall fail in nothing which concerns my service to your honor," and he set off at once. And when he arrived at his camp, it is said that he told Narvaez that Cortez and all of us who were with him were very willing to go over to Narvaez himself. Let us stop talking about this Duero affair, and I will relate how Cortez promptly sent to summon one of our captains named Juan Velazquez de Leon. When he had come before Cortez and made his salute, he said, "What are your orders, sir?" And as Cortez at times spoke honeyed words with a smile on his lips, he said, half laughingly, "What made me summon the Signor Juan Velazquez is what André de Duero has reported, which is that Narvaez says, and such is the report throughout his camp, that if your honor should go there, that I would be at once undone and defeated, for they believe that you would join with Narvaez, and for this reason I have resolved that, for the life of me, if you really love me, you shall go on your good grey mare and take all your gold and the fanfarona," which was a very heavy golden chain, "and other trifles that I will give you, in order to give them in my name to whomsoever I may direct. Your heavy Van Verona you shall carry over one shoulder, and another chain which weighs even more than it you shall wear round, twice round. Then you will see how Narvaez loves you. Try to come away again soon, for then the Signor Diego de Ordaz may go there, whom they wish to see in Narvaez camp, as he has been a mayordomo of Diego Velasquez. Juan Velasquez answered that he would do what his excellency commanded him, but that he would not take his own gold and his chains with him, only such as might be given him, with orders to hand over to certain persons. But wherever he might be, he would be at all times ready to render his excellency such service as no amount of gold or diamonds could procure. That was my belief, said Cortez, and with this confidence in you, sir, I send you. But unless you take all your gold and jewels as I command, I do not wish you to go. Juan Velasquez replied, Whatever your honor commands shall be done. But he did not wish to take his jewels. Cortez spoke to him then in private, and he at once set out and took with him one of Cortez's orderlies named Juan del Rio to attend on him. Within 2 hours of the departure of Juan Velasquez, Cortez ordered Canillas to beat the drum and Benito de Beguer, our fifer, to sound his tambourine, and he ordered Gonzalo de Sandoval, who was captain and chief constable, to summon all the soldiers, and we at once began our march in quick time along the road to Sempoala. While we were on the march, 2 native swine were killed, which have a scent gland on the back, and many of the soldiers said that it was a sign of victory, and we slept on a bank near a small stream, when our scouts ahead, and spies and patrols. When dawn broke, we went straight along and marched until midday, when we had a rest by a river where the town of Villarica de Veracruz now stands. Juan Velasquez made such speed on the road that he reached Sempoala by dawn, and dismounted at the house of the fat cacique, and thence went afoot to the quarters of Narvaez. The Indians recognized Juan Velasquez and were delighted to see and speak to him, and said aloud to some of the soldiers of Narvaez, who were quartered in the house of the fat cacique, that this was Juan Velasquez de Leon, one of Malinche's captains. As soon as the soldiers heard this, they went running to Narvaez to demand rewards for bringing the good news that Juan Velasquez de Leon had come. When Narvaez heard of his arrival, before Juan Velasquez could even reach his quarters, he went out to receive him in the street, accompanied by some soldiers. On meeting, they made a great show of reverence to one another, and Narvaez embraced Juan Velasquez and asked him why he did not dismount at his quarters, and he ordered his servants to go at once for the horse and baggage if he had brought any. Juan Velasquez replied that he wished to return at once, and that he had only come to kiss his hands, and those of all the gentlemen of his camp, and to see if his excellency and Cortez could agree to keep peace and friendship. Then it is said that Narvaez promptly repelled Juan Velasquez, greatly annoyed that such words should be spoken to him. What? To make friends and peace with a traitor who had rebelled with a fleet against his cousin Diego Velasquez? And Juan Velasquez replied that Cortez was no traitor, but a faithful servant of his majesty, and that to appeal to our lord and king as he had done should not be imputed to him as treason, and he begged Narvaez to use no such word in his presence. Then Narvaez began to bribe Juan Velasquez with great promises so as to persuade him to remain with him, and to arrange with the followers of Cortez to give Cortez up, and to come at once and place themselves under his command, promising him with oaths that he should be the foremost captain in all the camp, and be the second in command. Juan Velasquez answered that it would be a great treason to desert the captain to whom he had sworn obedience during war, and to abandon him, knowing as he did that all that he had done in New Spain was in the service of God our Lord and his Majesty, and that Cortez could not avoid appealing in the way he had appealed to our king and master, and he begged Narvaez to say no more about it. By that time all the most important captains from the camp of Narvaez had come to see Juan Velasquez, and they embraced him with the greatest courtesy, for Juan Velasquez was much of a courtier, well-made, robust, of good presence and features, and with a becoming beard, and he wore a great golden chain thrown over his shoulder, giving it 2 turns under his arm, and it suited him well in the part of the gallant and brave captain. It seems that at that time captains of Narvaez advised him to arrest Juan Velasquez at once, for it seemed to them that he was speaking very freely in favor of Cortez. When Narvaez had already secretly ordered his captains and constables to take him prisoner, Agustin Bermudez, and Andre de Duero, and our Padre de la Merced, and a priest named Juan de Leon, and Other persons from among those who had professed themselves friends of Cortez heard about it, and they said to Narvaez that they were astonished at his ordering Juan Velasquez de Leon to be arrested, for what could Cortez do against him, Narvaez, even if he had another 100 Juan Velasquezes in his company? That Cortez might easily have arrested Under de Duero and the priest Guevara and others who had gone to his camp, and he did not do so. On the contrary, as they had stated, he paid them great honor, and it would be better once again to speak to Juan Velasquez with much courtesy, and to invite him to dinner. This seemed to Narvaez to be good advice, and he promptly spoke again to Juan Velasquez in very affectionate terms, so that he should be the mediator through whom Cortez might give himself up with all of us, and he invited him to dinner. Juan Velasquez replied that in that case he would do what he could, although he held Cortez to be very obstinate and stubborn in the matter, and that it would be better to divide the provinces, and his honor Narvaez should choose the land that pleased him best. This Juan Velasquez said in order to pacify him. While these conversations were going on, the Padre de la Merced whispered to Narvaez, his confidant and adviser, which he had already become, "Order them to muster all your artillery and cavalry and musketeers and crossbowmen and soldiers, so that Juan Velasquez de Leon and the orderly Juan del Rio may see them, and so that Cortez may fear for your force." So, on the advice of our friar Narvaez, held a review before Juan Velasquez de Leon and Juan del Rio, and in the presence of our cleric. When it was finished, Juan Velasquez said to Narvaez, "You have brought a great force with you. May God increase it." Then Narvaez replied, "Ah, you can see that I had wished to go against Cortez. I should have taken him prisoner, and all of you that are with him." Then Juan Velasquez answered and said, "Look on him as taken, and us soldiers too, but we shall know well how to defend ourselves." And so the conversation ended. The next day Juan Velasquez was invited to dinner, and there was dining with Narvaez, a nephew of Diego Velasquez, the governor of Cuba, who was also one of his captains. And while they were eating at table, he began to talk of how Cortez had failed to surrender to Narvaez, and of the letter and summons that he sent him. And from one speech to another, the nephew of Diego Velasquez, who was also called Diego Velasquez, like his uncle, exceeded all bounds, and said that Cortez and all of us who were with him were traitors, because they did not come to submit themselves to Narvaez. When Juan Velasquez heard this, he rose from the chair on which he was seated, and with great ceremony said, "Senor Captain Narvaez, I have already told you that I cannot acquiesce in such words being spoken against Cortez, or against any of those who are with him, as those that have been uttered, for it is truly malicious to speak evil of us who have served his Majesty so loyally." Diego Velasquez replied that his words were well said, and that he, Juan Velasquez, was upholding a traitor, and that traitors were as worthless as he was, and that he was not a good Velasquez. Juan Velasquez grasped his sword and said that he lied, and that he was a better gentleman than he was, and a good Velasquez better than him or his uncle, and that he would let him know it if the senior captain Narvaez would give him leave. As there were many captains present, they placed themselves between them, and they advised Narvaez that he should promptly order Juan Velasquez to leave the camp, both him and the friar and Juan del Rio, for they felt sure that they were doing no good there. At once, without further delay, they were ordered to leave, and they, who could hardly await the hour of getting back to our camp, complied. It is said that Juan Velasquez mounted on his good mare in his coat of mail, which he always wore, and helmet and great golden chain, went to take leave of Narvaez, and Diego Velasquez, the youth who had quarrelled, was there with Narvaez. Juan Velasquez said to Narvaez, "What are your honor's orders for our camp?" Narvaez replied in a great rage that he should get him gone, and it would have been better had he never come. And the youth Diego Velasquez uttered threats and offensive words to Juan Velasquez, who answered that he was very audacious, and deserved chastisement for the words he had spoken, and placing his hand on his beard, he cried, "By this my beard I swear that I will see before many days whether your courage is as good as your words." So they parted, and keeping on their way, they met us at the river near Vera Cruz. When they arrived where we were, what delight and happiness we all experienced, and how many caresses and what praise did Cortez bestow on Juan Velasquez and on our friar, and he had good cause, for they were his faithful servants. Then Juan Velasquez related, step by step, all that I have already stated had happened to them with Narvaez, and how he sent secretly to give the chains and ingots and jewels of gold to the persons whom Cortez had indicated. Then you should have heard our friar. Being of a merry disposition, he well knew how to mimic his own behavior as Narvaez's faithful servant, and to tell how, in sheer mockery, he advised him to hold the review and call out his artillery, and with what astuteness and cunning he gave him the letter. Then he next related what happened to him with Salvatierra, and told us what fierce threats Salvatierra uttered as to what he would do and what would happen when he captured Cortez and all of us, and that he even complained to him about the soldiers who had stolen his horse, and that of the other captain, and we were all as delighted at hearing about it as though we were going on a wedding or a merrymaking. Although we knew that the next day we should be going into battle and must conquer or die in it, we being but 266 soldiers, and those of Narvaez being 5 times as numerous as we all marched at once, and we went to sleep near a small stream about a league from Cempoala, where there was a bridge. It seems that when Juan Velasquez and the friar and Juan del Rio went back, Narvaez was told by his captains that a belief had arisen in the camp that Cortez had sent many jewels of gold, and had gained friends to his side in the camp itself, and that it would be well to be much on the alert, and to warn the soldiers to have their arms and horses ready. In addition to this, the fat cacique was in great fear of Cortez, because he had allowed Narvaez to take the cloths and gold, and to seize the Indian women. Moreover, he always had spies out to see where we slept, and by what road we were coming, for so Narvaez had compelled him to do by force. When he knew that we were already arriving near to Cempoala, the fat cacique said to Narvaez, "What are you about? You are behaving very carelessly. Do you think that Malinche and the tools that he brings with him are the same as you are? Well, I tell you that when you least expect it, he will be here and will kill you." Although they made fun of those words that the fat cacique said to them, they did not fail to get ready, and the first thing they did was to declare war against us with fire and sword and free loot. This we heard from a soldier named El Galleguillo, who came fleeing from the camp of Narvaez, and he informed Cortez about the proclamation and about other things that it was as well to know. Let us return to Narvaez, who ordered all the artillery, horsemen, musketeers, and crossbowmen to be taken out to a plain about a quarter of a league from Cempoala to await us there, and not to let one of us escape either death or capture. As it rained hard that day, the followers of Narvaez had already had enough of waiting for us in the wet, and as they were accustomed neither to rain nor hardships, and did not think we were of any account, his captains gave him notice that they would return to their quarters, as it was an outrage to be kept there waiting for 2 or 3 men, as they said we were. They further advised Narvaez to place his artillery, which numbered 18 large cannon, in front of their quarters, and that 40 horsemen should remain all night waiting on the road by which we had come to Cempoala. Furthermore, that he should station his spies by the ford of the river which we would have to cross, selecting good riders and lithe runners to carry messages, and that 20 horsemen should patrol throughout the night in the courtyards of their quarters. This plan, which they communicated to him, was to induce him to return to his quarters. Moreover, his captain said to him, "What, Signor? Do you take Cortez to be so valiant as to dare, with the 3 cats which he commands, to come to this camp merely because this fat Indian says so? Don't you believe it, your honor? He had only made this fuss and pretense of coming so that your honor may grant good terms." It was in this way, as I have said, that Narvaez returned to his camp, and after his return he publicly proclaimed to give 2,000 pesos to whoever should kill Cortez or Gonzalo de Sandoval. He at once placed spies at the river, and the cry and countersign that he gave when they should fight against us in the camp was, "Santa Maria, Santa Maria." When we arrived at the stream about a league from Cempoala, where there were some good meadows, Captain Cortez sent to summon us, both captains and soldiers, and when he saw us assembled, he said to us that he begged the favor of silence. Then he began a speech in such charming style, with sentences so neatly turned, that I assuredly am unable to write the like. So delightful was it, and so full of promises, in which he at once reminded us of all that had happened to us since we set out from the island of Cuba until then. And he said to us, "You well know that Diego Velasquez, the governor of Cuba, chose me as captain general. Not that there were not many gentlemen among you worthy of the post, and you know and believed that we were coming to settle, for thus it was published and proclaimed. However, as you have seen, he was merely sending to trade. You are already aware of what happened about my wishing to return to the island of Cuba to render an account to Diego Velazquez of the task that he entrusted to me, in accordance with his instructions. But your honors ordered and obliged me to form a settlement in this country in his majesty's name, and thanks to our lord the settlement has been made, and it was a very wise decision. In addition to this, you made me your captain general and the chief justice of the settlement until his majesty may be pleased to order otherwise. As I have already mentioned, there was certain talk of returning to Cuba among some of you, but I do not wish to dwell further on that. It is, so to say, a bygone, and our staying was a blessed and good thing, for it is clear that we have done great service to God and his majesty. You already know that we told his majesty that this land is, so far as we have seen and know, 4 times larger than Castile, and has great cities, and is very rich in gold and mines, and how we begged his majesty not to give it away to be governed in any other manner by anyone whosoever, for we believed that the Bishop of Burgos would ask it from his majesty for Diego Velazquez, or for some relation or friend of the bishop's own. This land is so good that it would be proper to bestow it on an infante, or great prince, and we are determined not to give it up to anyone until his majesty shall have heard our proctors, and we behold his royal signature and approval, so that in all humility we may do what we may be pleased to order. You also know that we sent with the letters, and placed in his majesty's service all the gold and silver and jewels, and everything that we possessed or had acquired. Moreover, you will remember, gentlemen, how often we have been at the point of death in the wars and battles we have passed through. Let me remind you how inured we are to hardship, rains, winds, and sometimes hunger, always having to carry our arms on our backs, and to sleep on the ground whether it is snowing or raining, and if we examine it closely, our skin is already tanned from suffering. I do not wish to refer to over 50 of our comrades who have died in the wars, nor to all of you who are bandaged in rags and maimed from wounds which are not even yet healed. I should like to remind you of the troubles we had at sea, and in the battles of Tabasco, and those who were present at them, of the affairs of Almeria or Cinca, and how often in the mountains and on the roads attempts were made to take our lives. In what straits they placed us in the battle of Tlaxcala, and how they handled us. Then in the affair of Cholula, they had even prepared the earthen pots in which to cook our bodies. At the ascent of the passes, you will not have forgotten the forces that Montezuma had gathered to exterminate us, and you saw all the roads blocked with felled trees. Then, during the dangers of the entry into and stay in the great city of Mexico, how many times did we look death in the face? Who is able to count them? Then look at those among you who have come here twice before I did, first with Francisco Hernandez de Cordova, and the other time with Juan de Grijalva. Consider the hardships you underwent in discovering these countries, the hunger and thirst of the wounded, and loss by death of so many soldiers, and all the property of your own that you expended in those 2 voyages. Let us add now, gentlemen, that as Panfilo de Narvaez marches against us with great fury and desire to get us in his power, calling us traitors and malefactors even before he had landed, and sends messages to the great Montezuma, not in the wise words of a captain, but those of a mischief-maker, and as, in addition to this, he had the audacity to arrest one of his majesty's judges, for this great crime alone he deserves condign punishment. You have already heard how in his camp he has proclaimed war against us, and outlawed us as though we were Moors. Soon after saying this, Cortez began to extol our appearance and courage in the late wars and battles, saying that then we were fighting to save our lives, and that now we had to fight with all our strength both for life and honor, for they were coming to capture us and drive us from our houses and rob us of our property. Moreover, he added, we do not even know if he brings authority from our king and lord, or only support from our opponent, the Bishop of Burgos. And if, by ill luck, we should fall into the hands of Narvaez, which God prevent, all the services that we have done both to God and his majesty will turn to disservice. They will bring lawsuits against us, saying that we killed and robbed and destroyed the land, and where in truth they are the ones to rob, brawl, and deserve our lord and king, but they will claim that they have served him. Then he said that all that he had related he had seen with our own eyes, and that as true gentlemen we were bound to stand up for his Majesty's honor, and our own homes and property. He left Mexico on that understanding with confidence in God and in us, that first he trusted everything in the hands of God and next in our hands, and let us consider what we thought of it. Then, one and all, we answered him, jointly with Juan Velasquez de Leon and Francisco de Lugo and other captains, that he might feel sure that, God helping us, we would conquer or die over it, and he should look to it that they did not persuade him to terms, for if he should do anything underhand, that we would stab him. Then when he saw our determination, he rejoiced greatly. When this was over, he turned to beg us as a favor to keep silence, as the first thing to be done was to seize their artillery, which numbered 18 cannon, and was posted in front of the quarters of Narvaez. He appointed a relation of his own to go as captain, whose name was Pizarro, and he assigned to him 60 young soldiers, and he named me among them, and ordered that after the artillery was taken, we should all run to the quarters of Narvaez, which were on a very lofty queue. For the capture of Narvaez he named as Captain Gonzalo de Sandoval with 60 companions, and as he was chief constable he gave him an order which read thus: Gonzalo de Sandoval, chief constable of this New Spain, in his Majesty's name I command you to seize the person of Panfilo Narvaez, and should he resist, to kill him, for the benefit of the service of God and the King, insomuch as he has committed many acts to the disservice of God and of his Majesty, and arrested in Oyador. Given in this camp, and signed Hernan Cortez, countersigned by his secretary, Pedro Hernandez. After issuing the order, he promised to give 3,000 pesos to the soldier who first laid hand on Narvaez, and to the second 2,000, and 1,000 to the third. Then he chose Juan Velasquez de Leon to arrest the youth Diego Velasquez, with whom he had had to quarrel, and gave him another 60 soldiers, and he likewise named Diego de Ordat to arrest Silva, and gave him another 60 soldiers. And there was Cortez himself ready for an emergency with another 20 soldiers to hasten to where he was most needed, and where he intended to be present was at the capture of Narvaez, Salvatierra. As soon as the lists were given to the captains, Cortez said, I well know that the followers of Narvaez are on all 4 times as numerous as we are, but they are not used to arms, and as the greater part of them are hostile to their captain, and many of them are ill, and we shall take them by surprise, I have an idea that God will give us the victory, and that they will not persist much in their defense, for we shall procure them more wealth than their Narvaez can. So, gentlemen, our lives and honor depend, after God, on your courage and your strong arms. I have no other favor to ask of you, or to remind you of, but that this is the touchstone of our honor and our glory forever and ever, and it is better to die worthy than to live dishonored. And as at that time it was raining and was late, he said no more. There is one thing I have thought about since. He never told us. I have such and such an arrangement in the camp made with so-and-so, which is in our favor, nor anything of that kind, but merely that we were to fight like brave men, and this omitting to tell us that he had friends in the camp of Narvaez, was the action of a very astute captain, so that we should not fail to fight as very valiant men, and should place no hope in them, but only after God and our own great courage. Later on, they secretly gave us the password that we were to use while fighting, which was Espiritu Santo. Espiritu Santo! The followers of Narvaez had as their password a battle cry, Santa Maria, Santa Maria. When all this was finished, as I was a great friend and servant of Captain Sandoval, he begged me as a favor to keep him by that night, and follow him if I were still alive after capturing the artillery, and I promised him that I would do so, as will be seen later on. Let me say now that we spent part of the night in preparations and in thinking about what we had before us, for we had nothing at all on which to sup. I myself and one other soldier were posted as sentinels, and before long a scout came to ask me if I had perceived anything, and I said no. Then came an officer and said that Galleguillo, who came from the camp of Narvaez, had disappeared, and that he was a spy sent by Narvaez, and that Cortez ordered us to march at once on the road to Zempoala. And we heard our fifer, the beating of the drum, and the captains getting their soldiers ready, and we began to march. The Galleguillo was found asleep under some clothes, for as it was raining, and the poor fellow was not accustomed to be in the wet and cold, he went there to sleep. Then, going along at a good pace, and without any playing on the fife or drum, and with the scouts reconnoitering the road, we reached the river where the spies of Narvaez were posted, and they were so little on the lookout that we had time to capture one, and the other fled, shouting to the camp of Narvaez, crying, "To arms! To arms! Cortez is coming!" I remember that when we passed through that river, as it was raining, it had become rather deep, and the stones were slippery. We were much encumbered with our pikes and our arms, and I also remember that when the spy was captured, he said to Cortez in a loud voice, "Take care, Senor Cortez, don't you go on there, for I swear that Narvaez is waiting for you in camp with all his army." The order, "To arms," and Narvaez calling to his captains, and our charging with our pikes and engaging the artillery, happened simultaneously, and the gunners had time only to fire 4 shots, and some of the balls passed entirely overhead, but one of them killed 3 of our comrades. At that moment all our captains came up with the fife and drum, beating the charge, and as many of the followers of Narvaez were mounted, they were delayed for a few moments by them, but they promptly unhorsed 6 or 7 of them. Then we who had seized the guns did not dare to leave them, for Narvaez was shooting at us with arrows and muskets from his quarters, and wounded 7 of us. At that moment Captain Sandoval arrived and made a rush to scale the steps, and in spite of the strong resistance which Narvaez made with muskets, partisans, and lances, and flights of arrows, Sandoval and his soldiers still gained ground. Then, as soon as we soldiers saw that the guns were ours, and no one was left to dispute possession of them, we gave them over to our gunners and Captain Pizarro, and many of us went to the assistance of Sandoval, for the soldiers of Narvaez had driven them back down 2 of the steps. On our arrival, he turned to ascend the steps again, and we stood for some time fighting with our pikes, which were very long, and when I was least expecting it, we heard shouts from Narvaez, who cried, "Holy Mary, protect me! They have killed me and destroyed my eye." When we heard this, we at once shouted, "Victory! Victory for those of the password of Espiritu Santo, for Narvaez is dead! Victory! Victory for Cortez, for Narvaez has fallen!" But for all this, we were not able to force the entrance to the queue where they were posted, until a certain Martin Lopez, who was very tall, set fire to the thatch of the lofty queue, and all the companions of Narvaez came tumbling down the steps. Then we seized Narvaez, and the first to lay hands on him was Pedro Sanchez Farfan, a good soldier, and I gave him to Sandoval and the other captains who were with him, and we were still shouting and crying, "Long live the king! Long live the king! And in his royal name Cortez! Cortez! Victory! Victory! For Narvaez is dead!" Let us leave this struggle and return to Cortez and the other captains, who were each one of them still fighting against the captains of Narvaez, who had not yet yielded, notwithstanding the shots that our gunners fired at them, and our shouts and the death of Narvaez, for they were posted in very lofty temples. As Cortez was very sagacious, he promptly ordered it to be proclaimed that all the followers of Narvaez should come at once and yield themselves up under the banner of his majesty, and to Cortez in his royal name, under pain of death. Yet with all this, the followers of the youth, Diego Velazquez, and those of Salvatierra did not give in, for they were in very lofty temples and could not be reached until Gonzalo de Sandoval went with half of us who were with him, and with the cannon and the proclamation, and forced his way in and seized Salvatierra and those in his companies, as well as the youth Diego Velazquez. Then Sandoval came with all those who had gone to capture Narvaez to put him in a safer place, and after Cortez and Juan Velazquez and Ordaz had made prisoners of Salvatierra and the youth Diego Velazquez and Gamara and Juan Yuste and Juan Bono the Biscayan and other persons of importance, Cortez came, without being recognized, in company with our captains, to where we held Narvaez. As the heat was great, and as Cortez was burdened with his arms, and had been going from place to place shooting to our soldiers and giving out proclamations, He arrived sweating and tired and panting for breath. And he spoke to Sandoval twice, and did not succeed in saying what he wanted on account of the trouble he was in. And he said, "What about Narvaez? What about Narvaez?" And Sandoval said, He is here and well guarded." Then Cortez, still much out of breath, turned to say, "Take care, my son Sandoval, that you do not leave him, and that you and your comrades do not let him break away while I go and attend to other matters. And see to it that these other captains who are prisoners with him are guarded in every way." Then he promptly went off to issue other proclamations to the effect that under pain of death, all the followers of Narvaez should at once come to that place to surrender themselves under the banner of his majesty, and in his royal name to Hernan Cortez, his captain general and chief justice, and that no one should carry arms, but that all should give them up and hand them over to our constables. All this was done in the night, for it was not yet dawn, and it still rained from time to time. Then the moon came out, but when we had arrived there it was very dark and raining. However, the darkness was a help, for as it was so dark there were many fireflies which give light by night, and the soldiers of Narvaez believed that they were the match fires of muskets. Let us leave this, and go on to say that as Narvaez was very badly wounded and had lost an eye, he asked leave of Sandoval for his surgeon named Maestre Juan, whom he had brought with his fleet, to attend to his eye and to the other captains who were wounded, and permission was given. While they were being doctored, Cortez came nearby on the sly so that they should not recognize him, to see Narvaez. Someone whispered to Narvaez that Cortez was there. Hardly was this said to him than Narvaez exclaimed, "Senor Captain Cortez, must consider this a great feat, this victory which you have won over me, and the capture of my person." And Cortez answered him that he gave many thanks to God for giving the victory, and to the gallant gentlemen and comrades who had a share in it, but that to capture and defeat him, Narvaez, who had seen fit to dare to arrest one of his Majesty's judges, was one of the least important things he had done in New Spain. As soon as he had said this, he went away and said no more, but ordered Sandoval to place a strong guard over Narvaez, and to stay with him himself, and not leave him in charge of others. We had already placed 2 pair of fetters on him, and we carried him to an apartment and stationed soldiers to guard him, and Sandoval designated me as one of them, and privately he ordered me not to allow any of the followers of Narvaez to speak to him until it was daytime, and Cortez could place him in greater security. Let us leave this, and relate how Narvaez had sent 40 horsemen to wait for us on the road, when we were on our way to his camp, and we were aware that they were still wandering in the country, and were fearful lest they should come and attack us. Restarting paragraph due to train. Let us leave this, and relate how Narvaez had sent 40 horsemen to wait for us on the road, when we were on our way to his camp, and we were aware that they were still wandering in the country, and were fearful lest they should come and attack us, and rescue their captains and Narvaez himself, whom we held prisoner. So we kept much on the alert, and Cortez determined to send and beg them as a favor to come into camp, and made great offers and promises to them all. He dispatched Cristobal de Olid, who was our quartermaster, and Diego de Orda, to bring them in, and they went on horses that we had captured from the followers of Narvaez, for our horsemen brought no horses with them, but left them picketed in a small wood near Sempoala. We brought only pikes, swords, shields, and daggers. And they went out into the country with one of the soldiers of Narvaez, who showed them the track by which they had gone, and they came upon them, and gave expression to so many offers and promises on behalf of Cortez, that they won them over, but some gentlemen among them bore Cortez ill will. Before they reached our camp it was broad daylight, and the drummers brought by Narvaez without word from Cortez or any of us began to beat their kettle drums and play on their fifes and tambourines and cry, "Viva! Viva the gala of the Romans!" who, few as they were, have accompanied Narvaez and his soldiers. And a Negro named Guidela, whom Narvaez had brought with him, who was a very witty jester, cried out and said, "Behold, the Romans never accomplished such a feat." And although we told them to keep quiet and not to beat their drums, they would not do so until Cortez sent to arrest the drummer, who was named Tapia and was half crazy. At this moment came Cristobal de Olid and Diego de Arda, and brought in the horsemen whom I have mentioned, and among them came Andre de Duero and Agustin Bermudez, and many of our captain's friends, who as soon as they came went to kiss hands to Cortez, who was with us around him, seated on an armchair, wearing a long orange-colored robe with his armor beneath it. Then to see the graciousness with which he addressed and embraced them, and the flattering words that he said to them, were matters worthy of note, and how cheerful he was. And he had good cause in seeing himself at that moment such a lord and so powerful. And so, after kissing his hands, each one passed to his quarters. Let us speak now of those who were killed and wounded on that night. The standard-bearer of Narvaez, named Fuentes, a gentleman from Seville, died. Another of Narvaez's captains, named Rojas, a native of Old Castile, also died, and 2 of the other followers of Narvaez died. There also died one of the 3 soldiers who had belonged to us and had gone over to Narvaez. Many of the soldiers of Narvaez were wounded, and 4 of our men died, and more were wounded, and the fat cacique also was wounded, for when he knew that we were nearing Sempoala, he took refuge in the quarters of Narvaez, and there he was wounded. And Cortez at once ordered him to be well attended, and placed him in his house so that he should not be molested. Then the mad Cervantes and Escalona, who were those who had been of our party and had gone over to Narvaez, fared badly, for Escalona was severely wounded and Cervantes well beaten. Let us go to those in the quarters of Salvatierra the Fierce, of whom his soldiers say that never in all their lives did they see a more worthless man, or one so much alarmed at death when he heard us beat to arms. It is reported that when we cried out, "Victory, victory, for Narvaez is dead," he promptly said that he was very sick at the stomach, and was no good for anything. This I have related because of his threats and bravado. Some of the men of his company were wounded. Our captain Juan Velasquez de Leon captured Diego Velasquez, with whom he had the strife when he dined with Narvaez, and he took him to his quarters and ordered him to be cared for and treated with all honor. I have already said that Cortez had sent to advise the towns of Chinantla that 2,000 of their Indians with their lances should come to aid us, and they came late in the afternoon of this very day, after Narvaez had been made prisoner, under the command of their own caciques. They entered Sempoala in good array, 2 by 2, so gallantly that it was an affair worthy of note. When the followers of Narvaez beheld them, they were astonished, and it is reported that they said to one another, "If those people had caught them in the rear, or had come in with us, what could have stopped them?" Cortez thanked the Indian captains for coming, and he gave them beads from Castile, and ordered them to return at once to their towns. After Panfilo de Narvaez had been defeated and all his followers disarmed, Cortez directed Captain Francisco de Lugo to proceed to the port where the fleet of Narvaez, which numbered 18 ships, was lying, and to order all the mates and masters of the ships to come up to Sempoala, and to remove the sails, rudders, and compasses, so that they should not carry the news to Diego Velasquez in Cuba, and that if they refused to obey him, he was to make them prisoners. The masters and mates promptly came to kiss hands to Captain Cortez, and he made them take an oath that they would not leave his command, and would obey whatever orders he gave them. Then he appointed as admiral and captain of the sea one Pedro Caballero, who had been master of one of the ships of Narvaez, a person whom Cortez thoroughly trusted. Orders were given that Juan Velasquez de Leon should proceed to conquer and form a settlement in the region of Panuco, and for this Cortez allotted him 120 sailors. 100 were to be followers of Narvaez, with 20 of our men mixed with them, as they had more experience in war. He also gave another command to Diego de Arda of another 120 soldiers to go and settle in the region of Coatzacoalcos. In order that those captains and their soldiers could set out fully armed, Cortez had them equipped, and ordered all the prisoners who were captains under Narvaez to be set free, except Narvaez himself and Salvatierra, who said that he was ill of the stomach. Now, as to furnishing them with all their arms, as some of our soldiers had already taken some of their horses, swords, and other things, Cortez ordered them all to be given back to them, and over our refusal to give them up there occurred certain angry discussions. Cortez still contended that we must give them up, and as he was captain general we had to do what we ordered. I gave them a horse which I had hidden away, saddled and bridled, and 2 swords and 3 poniards and a dagger. Many others of our soldiers also gave up horses and arms. Alonso de Avila was a captain and a person who dared to speak his mind to Cortez, and he and the Padre de la Merced together spoke privately, and told him that all the gold and jewels that the Indians had presented to him, and all the food he had given to the captains of Narvaez, forgetting us as though he had never known us, and it was not well done, but a very great ingratitude after we had placed him in his present position. To this Cortez replied that all that he possessed, both his person and his property, was ours, but for the present he could do no less than propitiate the followers of Narvaez with gifts, good words, and promises, for there were many in number, and we were few, lest they should rise against him and us and kill him. Let us return now to Narvaez, and a black man whom he brought covered with smallpox, and a very black affair it was for New Spain, for it was owing to him that the whole country was stricken and filled with it, from which there was a great mortality, for according to what the Indians said, they had never had such a disease, and as they did not understand it, they bathed very often, and on that account a great number of them died, so that dark as was the lot of Narvaez, still blacker was the death of so many persons who were not Christians. Let me say how ill luck suddenly turns the wheel, and after great good fortune and pleasure follows sadness. It so happened that at this moment came the news that Mexico was in revolt, and that Pedro de Alvarado was besieged in his fortress and quarters, and that they had set fire to this same fortress in 2 places, and he had killed 7 of his soldiers and wounded many others, and he sent to demand assistance with great urgency and haste. This news was brought by 2 Tlaxcalans without any letter, but a letter soon arrived by 2 other Tlaxcalans sent by Pedro de Alvarado, in which he told the same story. When we heard this bad news, God knows how greatly it depressed us. By forced marches we began our journey to Mexico, Narvaez and Salvatierra remaining as prisoners in Villarica. Just at this moment, as we were ready to start, there arrived 4 great chieftains, sent to Cortez by the great Montezuma to complain to him of Pedro de Alvarado, and what they said, with tears streaming from their eyes, was that Pedro de Alvarado sallied out from his quarters with all the soldiers that Cortez had left with him, and for no reason at all fell on their chieftains and caciques, who were dancing and celebrating a feast in honor of their idols Huichilobos and Tezcatlipoca. Pedro de Alvarado having given them leave to do so, he killed and wounded many of them, and in defeating themselves they had killed 6 of his soldiers. Thus they made many complaints against Pedro de Alvarado, and Cortez, somewhat disgusted, replied to the messengers that he would go to Mexico and put it all to rights. So they went off with the reply to their great Montezuma, who, it is said, resented it as a very bad one, and was enraged at it. Cortez also promptly dispatched letters to Pedro de Alvarado, in which he advised him to look out that Montezuma did not escape, and that we were coming by forced marches, and he informed him about the victory we had gained over Narvaez, which Montezuma knew about already, and I will leave off here and tell what happened later on.